Well, I'm delighted to welcome our first guest today. He's a gentleman who wears many different hats. I'm going to call him a Midlands media mogul. Can I call you that?
All different turbans.
Well, that's true. Indeed.
Maybe different turbans.
Ninder Johal, great to see you. It's been
Good
a while
afternoon,
since we've
yeah.
sat down and had a natter.
It has been
I
a
mean,
while.
you run awards events, you dabble in video, in publishing, in all sorts of things. So how do you describe yourself to people?
Yeah, I think people's businesses evolve over time. I think ours, it started as an events business, then we moved into publishing, then we're in film production because it's part of the events, and now, of course, we're into doing summits. So I suppose over time, we've become more of a media company than a production event company. But I think things change, evolve over time, and you roll with the times.
How much of that evolution has been due to what we've all been through the last 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, well, COVID was interesting. So you can imagine during those 2 years, face-to-face events, which is predominantly what we were, came to a stop. We had a big audience we developed over the years across the whole country. How do we communicate with them? Because the biggest threat to us was our brand, because we don't know pre-vaccine whether we'd be out for 4 or 5 years. So we had to plug that gap somehow. And we thought, well, how can we maintain and stay in contact with our, all the audience? And the magazine seemed to be the natural choice. And so we published a magazine, and it's now doing extremely well in America through Barnes & Noble. I think it's about 800 stores. Then we got a distribution deal in Canada with the biggest bookstores there called Indigo. And we're in negotiation with a couple of distributors here, so step at a time. But of course, what it's done is it's given us what we call an ecosystem. So people can now read about business through the influencer, both digital and physical. They can visit our podcast, so they'll be able to catch this hopefully on our podcast as well. And they can, of course, if you want to touch and feel business, then you come to the events and you can actually meet the people that are in the magazine at the events.
So it's great on a couple of levels, isn't it? In that you launched effectively a new business during lockdown, and you're in a business where people say print and magazines are dead, and they're not, are they? They're not.
Well, this is interesting. So part of entrepreneurship is understanding an opportunity where others don't see it, and then taking not a gamble, but taking a risk assessing, and then saying, right, what are the pluses and minuses of taking a direction that everybody else seems to be vacating. And so that was the gamble. But then, of course, we have a much bigger ecosystem, so we could take that gamble. And interestingly, I think maybe because of COVID, we've got too accustomed to digital and are now fed up of digital and actually want to read something and physically hold it in our hands.
You've had a Zoom meeting.
Yeah. And I think the other thing we also did was, and I suggested to all entrepreneurs, do your research. So we subscribed to every business publication we could find. And there's some fantastic ones, and then we asked ourselves, how can we be different? So we deliberately went upmarket, and our magazine card, believe it or not, in the US is the most expensive magazine on the market.
Is that right?
We are more expensive. We are more expensive than any other magazine. It's selling at $25. That's a lot of money. And so when I spoke to the person who's importing it, they said, firstly, the quality warrants it. Second, the diversity of the content is great. The diversity of the contributors are great, and by the way, it's a British product. They expect to pay more.
Interesting, because there's a whole new another debate you could have about that, about how sometimes you can price yourself out of the actual quality that you're trying to. You can underprice yourself, and then you're not giving the image. So obviously, as you say, it helps with an ecosystem. You've got your Nachural awards, local awards coming up in a few days, haven't you?
Yes,
really.
absolutely.
So you're looking very calm. Is it all everything under control?
Well, again, a tip for anybody who's in business is build a good team around you. So they're all feverishly working behind.
Well, you do the showbiz stuff.
Well, yeah, so until I come here, and of course, then the Friday itself, which is the Signature Awards at the Vox, we're expecting up to 600 people.
Excellent.
So it's going to be quite busy on the night. And we've got people coming from all around the country, interestingly. So one of our nominees is a lady who runs a finance company in Glasgow. So
right, so they're not all just Birmingham and Greater Birmingham.
So I said to the Glasgow region, why have you entered the Signature Awards? She said, well, for all intents and purposes, she sees Birmingham as the place to be. So she's flying out to come here. And we get a lot of people from the East Midlands coming into the West. We'll chat about that in a second. We've got certainly a few people come from London who see investment opportunities in Birmingham because that's, it's a city that's on the way up. So we are actually in the hub of enterprise, in the hub of commercial excellence, and in the hub, where actually our people are served and skilled by the best world-class universities you can get. And of course, all the universities are going to be in the room. Aston University, UCB are going to be in the room, BCU are going to be in the room. BCU and Aston are sponsors, but they're going to be in the room. So a lot of very talented academics, a lot of very talented universities, and of course, entrepreneurs at the core.
It's interesting because we'll see a bit later in the show what happened earlier this week when I went up to the top of a skyscraper. We did an interview with some property experts on the 35th floor at the Square in Broad Street. And we were talking there about how we need to talk up the strength of this region more. But if you've got people coming down from Glasgow, that's showing the pull of Birmingham and the greater Birmingham area, isn't it?
And just to give you another, so in June, in the summer, we're planning to do a business and economic summit around the Midlands. And we are expecting at that summit, which will happen locally, a lot of people coming from outside the region and in the region, east and west, who will see the potential of not just the region, but certainly Birmingham at its core.
Which is good to know. Now, I know that having been to some of your awards, which are always at fantastic occasions,
Thank you.
That you always like to do a bit of a State of the Nation report about how you see things in the economy. I know you're a very keen, avid reader and student of the economy. So what's on your mind at the moment? What do you think? What are people talking to you about?
Look, I picked up a copy this morning and thought see what's going on. So a couple of things, I suppose. For the region, particularly the Black Country, manufacturing is core. And one of the things that's really hit the region, the Black Country, has been energy prices. So it's interesting to listen this morning, a leaked plan to disaggregate the Department of Business and actually have a minister responsible just for energy. And I think...
Do you see that as a good thing for the region?
I think so. Firstly, it emphasises the role of energy in everyday life. So I think that's the one thing. And the second thing, I think the Ukraine situation has sort of illustrated how vulnerable we are to energy. And of course, the long-term criticism of all governments, irrespective blue or red, is that they've never really had a long-term energy strategy. And maybe this is the time to do it. And so I'm pleased, both for the UK, I'm pleased for the region, but particularly in the Black Country, where we do rely, when it comes from manufacturing, lots and lots of energy. So I think that's I think is a great move, if it transpires from what we're hearing.
What are you hearing from businesses about just how much they're struggling or otherwise to cope with the the rate of escalation of energy at the moment?
Listen, I've heard people have said to me that they're thinking of shutting shop because the acceleration has just been ridiculous. So we're talking about people sometimes paying $2,500 per month, now being asked to pay 20, and that just makes it unviable. So I know there's been help in the short term for businesses, but I think we do need a long-term solution to this. Because if Ukraine's one example, there may be others to come that we don't see, and we're hearing rumours about where other pinch points could be.
Absolutely. Well, it makes you analyse every tiny little bit of where you might have a weak point, doesn't it? So.
Yeah, and of course, as businesses, we all stress test. But now it's making, and certainly as somebody in the events production business, we always wonder when the next COVID's coming. So you do start to think about the things that you would have never, ever thought of, but that's part of business.
I guess the other thing, though, during COVID, a lot of businesses who maybe thought there was only one way that they could do something have realised that that's not true, isn't it? That you get round things, you find a way, don't you?
Yeah. So I mean, look, most entrepreneurs are used to daily challenges, daily changes, and they're programmed to find solutions. And that's the way forward. And the more successful ones are the ones who anticipate problems and create opportunities for themselves. And of course, for some people, a crisis is a great place to opportunity and take an opportunity.
Some people have made money out of it, haven't they? No doubt about it.
Lots of money. And then, of course, unfortunately, some who were totally dependent. So it was interesting when the whole thing happened. We started to question, crikey, where could this take us? And we stress tested, and we were okay for a couple of years. But the worry was, as I said earlier, the brand, whether the brand would then become obsolete by the time we'd come back.
Have you found now, though, I mean, I guess maybe this year is probably going to be the first normal year since the COVID outbreak first started, that there's a real appetite for people who want to get back out and about, to awards events, to conferences, to sort of network with people and celebrate and remind people that it's back.
Well, so absolutely. So we've always been, and I did it when I was president of the Chamber of Commerce, I always thought there was, at that time, back in 2016, I thought there was a vacuum when it came to celebrating business, which is why I set about doing the Signature Awards around the country. And because I think for too often, entrepreneurs themselves forget how brilliant they are. And certainly the point is that without entrepreneurs, we wouldn't have the bedrock of economic growth. And we heard about all these strikes and things happening. Well, the money's got to come from somewhere, and generally speaking, it's from business, because they employ the people who also pay the tax. So I think we do need to take out time. And just interestingly, our sales of the magazine in America are really flying. And I do wonder, when we do the negotiations in England or the UK, actually where there's the same appetite for entrepreneurial magazines, and this will be a telling
different
sign.
mindset, isn't it?
It's a different mindset. So, so it'll be an interesting exercise just to see how well the magazine does here compared to the States where it's flying.
Do you think that's to do with the fact that maybe sometimes, us Brits, us reserved Brits, we don't feel quite so confident boasting about how maybe we've done something well, do we?
Well, I was talking to somebody who works for me in the States, looking after the brand, and she does regularly accuse me, of downplaying what we do. And she said, look, they just don't do it like this in America. They go the other way. And she said, you're just far too reserved. And it's difficult. It's difficult because we like to say it as it is rather than what it might be.
Now, it's up on my skyscraper, as I said, that we'll see a bit, not my skyscraper, the skyscraper, that we'll see a bit later on, saw the fantastic panoramic views of Birmingham, including, you could see the route where HS2 is going to be coming into town. What are you hearing about that? How are you feeling about that?
Well,
I mean, there's been it's never been really out of the headlines in the last 5 years.
Look, it's interesting. I mean, I've just take that here. So the HS2 cuts threaten to slash route and add delays. I think it's a brilliant idea, by the way. I think we need, if you travel around Europe, if you see how good and how well their trains run, we are miles behind. And of course, the last time we've had any kind of innovation was going back to when the trains first started. And I remember I read somewhere that the people at the time said, well, what the hell is this? We're fine with a horse and cart. So, you have to move on. You have to move and prepare for the century in front of us. So I think, and of course, what hasn't helped now is because of COVID, the supply chain and prices have skyrocketed. And of course, cost of living has gone up. And that's made suddenly the projections, which I'm sure they never thought would happen, has made it even higher. But I think with everything, this is not just for us. This will be for generations to come. And I think when you assess the viability of a project, you don't assess it in a finite time. You say, well, actually, its benefits will continue to deliver, I don't know, 50 years, 70 years. And it's over 70 years, I think you amortize, that they call it, the cost, and say, well, actually, for the next 70 years, this will be worth it. But if it doesn't end up finishing at Central London, when it should, I think that'll be a big mistake.
It's got to be all or nothing, isn't it?
It's got to be all or nothing. Yeah. And if you ask most entrepreneurs, they go for all and hope it works, but generally it does. But you've got to go big. You've got to have that positive mindset, and you've got to say, look, whatever it may come, it may hurt us in the short term, but long term, it'll be great for the country. So for us in the Midlands here, we're at the heart of it. And so for us, it's important that it goes both ways.
I was talking to Lord Digby Jones on the show last month about HS2, and his argument was it shouldn't have come from London upwards. It should have come from the north downwards instead. And his argument was that those are the priorities from a connectivity and a speed point of view.
I think from a levelling up perspective, absolutely. It's if you want to level up, then you want the north. Listen, we could be greedy here. We want both. We want up north and we want down south, and we want both. So for us, if we were to be greedy, we want both. And I think if you want a truly connected country, and if you want levelling up to go right across the country, you do need to connect the north, the middle, and London. And you can't have a go at London and say, well, look, they've got everything already. We should all benefit. Don't take things away from London just to give to us in the north. They should continue to do what they do, and we should continue to do it, and we should all be flourishing. Let's not play the competitive game. So I'm not at all questioning what Digby's saying. I think we should have both.
Well, as you say earlier, if you've got people coming down from Glasgow for your awards, it shows just how transient the economy is and the business community is.
Well, I think the other thing is business people and businesses and entrepreneurs don't see geographical boundaries. Yeah. So I think what we should as a country is not look at North and London as competition. We should be looking at Bangladesh, China and India as competition. So how can we move goods and people, increase our productivity up and down the UK so that we can compete with people from the East, and that's where the battle is. And I think that's how and if you look at China, I think their infrastructure is superb, the way they move things around. And that's the kind of level we should be getting to. So that's my sort of belief in HS2.
And it's also the competition, isn't it? You know, it's a global market, isn't it? It's a global
market.
world. So how are you generally feeling then about 2023? A lot of the headlines are trying to, talk about the fact interest rates have gone up for 10 months in a row, things are hard, everybody's struggling, everybody's worried about how much they're spending. Are you feeling more optimistic now than you were at the start of the year?
Okay, so let me take you back to 2020. And everybody said this is the roaring 20s. I remember that was the word flying around, the roaring 20s. March 2020 changed all that. And I think we went through a health crisis, a major health crisis, then had economic effects. Where do I see? I think it's going to be bunkers down for the next 12 months. But the general commentators are saying inflation is going to dramatically drop. And if that dramatically drops, it'd be interesting what they do with interest rates. Do they then say, well, actually, inflation's under control, we can now drop interest rates? If they drop that, then we're on our way to recovery. We've just got to hold our nerve. And if, I was talking to Roy Richardson, and he reminds me that in the 70s and 80s, we had interest rates of 15%. And of course, some economists will tell you, our natural level of interest rates should be around 4 or 5.
It's about what we're at now, isn't it?
What we are now. So really, we've been fortunate that we've enjoyed an unprecedented rate of interest rates that have been incredibly low. And of course, when it was incredibly low, people still moaned it was too high. So I think there is a bit of context here. We've got to look at it. And my understanding is that we will look for it to fall eventually to 2 to 3% back to where we are. You've just got to knuckle down. You've just got to work hard, focus. And to me, I think the picture is very, very good going forward.
One thing's for certain, though, Ninder, when interest rates are going up or down, the savings rates always come down more quickly than they go up, don't they?
Yeah, well, I think the least we say about that, it's no different to energy prices.
That's right. Yeah.
You hear the energy prices globally, the markets go down, but the petrol pump doesn't seem to move much.
No.
And no electric costs. So, yeah, they're a bit slow in passing down the savings, but very quick to hike it up. Yeah. So, listen, I'm not going to argue with that.
There's a bit of margin somewhere in there, isn't
yes,
there?
yes.
Listen, great. Good luck with your awards.
Thank
I'm
you.
sure we'll be waiting to hear about all the winners and some fabulous celebrations. Even though you've got people coming from all over the world, I'm sure there'll be a healthy proportion of great West Midlands entrepreneurs on display.
Well, listen, it's great pride to me that all these people are coming into Birmingham. We're generating the local economy. We're putting Birmingham on the map. We've got Manchester. A lot of people coming from Manchester because we're going to Manchester to do our awards. A lot of people come from Manchester, a lot from London, and as I said, from Glasgow. And we've got a couple of people, if I remember now, coming from Delhi as well. So it's all good, exciting times. But at the core of it is we've got to celebrate the brilliant entrepreneurs we have here in the region and UK.
And I know for a fact that that's exactly what you like doing. So
thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming in. It's always great to see you.
Cheers.
This is Birmingham Business TV coming to you from the Liquid Media Centre in Birmingham. Don't forget, if you've missed any of the interviews we've done on previous shows, you can catch our YouTube channel. You can binge watch the box set on there. Joel Blake Business Show is coming up in a few minutes' time. First, though, here's Henry Carpenter with some news headlines.